very much, everyone, for coming on this special evening to hear a very important message, a message that can't be forgotten, a message about perseverance, a message about endurance, a message that is so important for us to pass on to the next generation. But we are hearing this story tonight, today really, before the night, in the Sfiras HaOmer, on the day of Tiferes. Every day in the Omer, when we count the Omer, has a little phrase that's connected to it, describing the uniqueness of this day. And this is the day of Tiferes, of beauty, simply understood as beauty. But the pasuk tells us, Ateres Zikenim, the crown of the elders, B'nei Bonim, V'Tiferes Bonim, Avosov. The Tiferes of the Bonim is Avosam, is their parents, their grandparents. We in this shul know very well your Einiklach, your grandchildren, the Kreitmans, the Moisas, and Baruch Hashem, you have tremendous Atara, you have a tremendous crown. But Baruch Hashem, tonight we have the opportunity to learn, to get a little bit of a glimpse of the Tiferes, where the beauty all stems from, the Avosam, on the day of Tiferes, Shebet Tiferes. I am so excited to hear, and I just like to call upon Benji to give a little bit of a description and a bio about our speakers tonight, his great uncle and his grandfather. But I just like to quote Mr. Shanzer, what he told me just 2 minutes before, that greater than the mount the calf wants to suck, the cow wants to feed. And that is really what the pasuk of the Tiferes Bonim is all about. And Baruch Hashem, you fed such beautiful calves. And now let us hear about the cow that is fed and created these calves. And Emir Hashem will shep nachas from these calves for many years to come. Benji.
I just wanted to say a few words. I grew up, growing up around the corner from my grandfather, my pop-up. You grow up in a home you have your grandfather as a Holocaust survivor. At first, you don't even know what that means. As a child, I never even would have known that my grandfather had a sad part of his life. You would hear stories during the times pre-Holocaust, Holocaust, where it sounds like my grandfather and my Uncle Bernie were having a really great time. They really knew how to enjoy themselves. Post-Holocaust also. They never really seemed to let the enjoyment of life be taken away from them. On the flip side, as he got a little older, matured a little bit, their relationship matured a little bit. You see the depth of the struggles that they went through, and the terrible things that they had to endure due to the Nazis, and their tremendous story of their survival and their hakara tov to the family that took them in, that still We have a karatov to them to tell today, every summer. Take care of their mishpacha. Baruch Hashem. And it is this pleasure that I get to listen to my grandfather and my Uncle Bernie, who are so tremendously close together due to their partially due to their relationship that they developed in their time in the Holocaust. That I get to listen to them share their story and tell it over to the next generation, who will be able to reap the benefit of having heard these types of things and to take the lessons from that you can from how to approach life going through these terrible times and how to really have a karatov for those that have given towards you. That I'd like to introduce my Pop-Up and my Uncle Bernie.
Before we start, I must tell you, thank you very much, Rabbi, but we're each one only worth half a crown. And it's a pleasure to be here and to have been invited to speak to you. As Benji has told you, we've told our story to our children and grandchildren, and we share our story with you, and you become part of our family. Our story, however, is a story of terror and survival told from a child's point of view. We were 7.5 when we were first impacted by the Shoah. And we testify as to a crime that was committed against our family and against humanity. But most of all, it was a crime committed against the Jews. The intent of the final solution of the Nazis was to kill every Jew, to kill every single Jew, irrespective of age, gender, religious affiliation, or social status. On August 26, 1942, our father, Bruno Schanzer, was caught in a roundup in Saint-Étienne, France. From there, he was sent to Drancy, and from there, he was sent in a convoy, which was a cattle car, in which there were 1,016 people. At the end of the war, from that convoy, there were only 30 persons who had left, who were still alive. Unfortunately, our father was not among them. This is the name of our father, and below that, what I find unforgivable is the name of two children, Henri and Elise Ulezalka, who were 5 and 9. They were alone. They were, as you can see, no parents with them. They were destined to be murdered. Henry and I could have been on that convoy, and we could have been on that list. How did we survive? We owe our survival to righteous Gentiles, to Chassidei Humos, and a most resourceful mother. The righteous Gentiles were Jeanne Bonhomme, whom we called Tatan Jeannot or Aunt Jane, a mother, Adolphine Dorel, whom we called Mémé or Grandma, and we've added to the list the Marquis and the Marquise de Virieu. If they are not remembered and praised, we have not filled our mission. So to put our story and that of our family in perspective, note that our mother, Bella, was born in Poland, and our father, Bruno, was born in Czechoslovakia. Our mother came from a very traditional Hasidic background. And this is a photo of our grandmother, Shoret-Vora. Our father came from a more liberal, secular background, and this is a picture of our grandmother, Charlotte Schanzer. Ironically, my brother Bernard is named after our grandfather, Bernard Schanzer, who was killed fighting for the Austrians against the French and the Allies. Our parents immigrated to Belgium in the early 1930s, where they met. They were married in 1932, and we show you a copy of their marriage certificate to establish our legitimacy. My sister Anna was born in 1934, and my twin brother and I followed a year later in 1935. We lived in Liège, Belgium, which, as you probably all know, is just north of France. Look at this picture of our family taken in 1936 when Bernie and I were just about a year old. That's our father, our mother, our sister, and one of them is me, the other one is Bernie. On this picture, we don't know which one is which. But I like to say the good-looking one is me. That's me. We have another photo of the family, just my sister, my brother, and I, taken in 1939. We're still not quite sure which is which on this picture. But we show you these pictures for two reasons. First of all, to show you that these two old men that you're seeing today were at once young and very cute, and you can understand why our mother loved us. But the other reason is to show you these pictures is to underscore the cruelty and inhumanity of the Nazis and their helpers who planned to kill such innocent and angelic children. Our ordeal began when the Germans invaded Belgium on May 10, 1940. Within a few days, 15 members of our extended family crammed into a small van, and this included my grandmother, who had just suffered a heart attack, and my sister, who had just had her appendix removed. We crammed into a small van, and we fled ahead of the Germans towards France. My first experience with the horrors of war occurred as we were fleeing towards the French border. German planes began to strafe the line of cars on the road and the town we were approaching. Those of us who were able to do so jumped out of the van and took cover on the side of the road. As the planes flew by, we saw cars, buildings, and people being blown up into the air. After the bombing, we continued our travels to the south of France, and then we proceeded somewhat northeast to the city of Saint-Étienne. We reached Saint-Étienne about September, October of 1940. From the fall of 1940 until the summer of 1942, I have no recollection of our children's world being threatened. We even managed to go on a family vacation in the summer of 1941 to the French countryside. We were then 6 years old, and here again you can see the picture of our father, our mother, Bernie, and my sister and I. On this vacation, you can see the three smiling children, but I want you to notice who took the long-sleeved shirt, the good belt, and the good sandals, and left me with the short-sleeved shirt, the lousy belt, and believe it or not, the holy sneakers. As to our family's involvement in things Jewish, we have several things to share with you, but I'll tell you one story. Shortly after we settled in Saint Etienne, my parents decided that it was necessary for us to learn a little Hebrew, and they hired a Hebrew teacher to come in and teach us Hebrew. Unfortunately, as soon as he walked into our room, we took an instant dislike to him, and the feeling was probably mutual. Anyway, at the end of our lesson, we walked out to our balcony. We had a balcony overlooking the street, and as our teacher was walking down the street, we pelted him with wet paper towels. That was the end of our Hebrew lessons. But our father, who was a strict disciplinarian, administered a different lesson to our little behinds. Unfortunately, any degree of normalcy came to an abrupt end in the summer of 1943. Saint-Étienne was in Vichy France, and although Vichy France was not under the immediate German control, the French government and the police participated actively, willingly, and intensively in the arrest and deportation of Jews. To their shame, the French, like the Poles today, did not officially acknowledge their role in aiding the Nazis until 1995. In mid-July of 1942, my parents had sent Bernie and me to a summer camp. We came home from camp in early August to find the atmosphere tense and supercharged. There was a palpable sense of gloom and doom. Years later, we learned from our mother that many stories were circulating about German atrocities. Our father, who had been educated in Germany, did not believe that the so-called civilized Germans could possibly behave in the manner being reported. Our mother, who had been brought up in Poland and subjected to virulent anti-Semitism from her earliest days, feared the worst. Unfortunately, our parents and the other members of our extended family opted to stay in Saint-Étienne. In mid-August 1942, after our return home from camp, our parents informed us that they would be sending us to be boarded with an acquaintance that my father had made, and that our sister would be going to a school in Lyon, which was right near Saint-Étienne. Henry and I have the distinct recollection of our father walking us to the bus, carrying our suitcases. As we waited for the bus, our father again told us that we would be going away for a couple of weeks, but that we should be on our very best behavior. And then he took us, each one on a knee, and he held us. And as he held us, all of a sudden, everything started shaking. We were startled. Our father, who never showed much emotion, was crying. The bus came, he helped us get on the bus, and as we looked out of the window, we saw our father. He was 39 years old at that time. We would never see him again, and he would never see us again. After a short ride, we arrived at the destination, at the farm where we were going to stay. Henry and I, we don't remember their name, but we've dubbed them Monsieur et Madame Chrétien. After we had been there for a week, our mother came to visit, and we spent the day together. At the end of the visit, we walked our mother back to the bus depot, and as she was waiting for the bus, a French policeman, was going from person to person, asking them for their identity papers. When he came to my mother's, he said, "You are wanted by the police in Saint-Étienne." Our mother, extremely resourceful, told the policeman that she hadn't done anything wrong and that she would go immediately, the moment she arrived in Saint-Étienne, go to the police and clarify the matter. The policeman was going to accompany her. Our mother reassured him and gave him a pourboire, a tip. You cannot bribe a policeman, but it's all right to give him a reward. Policeman convinced, he let my mother get on the bus. She goes back towards the town, but before getting off at the last station, she gets off a little bit before that, goes to our apartment, and our apartment by this time had been seized and locked. This was August the 26th, 1942. On that fateful day, my mother found out that our father had been rounded up, as well as his brother Max, her brother Boris Ein, her sister Frida Shapiro, and her husband Boris, as well as our cousin Jack, who was half a year older than we. Subsequently, our cousin Jack was taken out from a camp by a French cardinal, but all the other members of the family were deported and murdered. After seeing my mother off at the bus depot, we went back to the farm and we told Monsieur and Madame Chrétien what had happened. Our initial welcome had been, if not warm, cordial, but then everything changed. They seemed cool and distant. Monsieur and Madame Chrétien became afraid because they were hiding Jewish children. They went to see Dr. Fargier, the doctor who was in charge of paying him for our care, and they wanted more money. Dr. Fargier said, I'd love to give you more money, but before I can give you any more, I've got to speak to the Schanzers. I've got to speak to Mrs. Schanzer and Mr. Schanzer. My father obviously had been deported. My mother had gone into hiding. After a couple of weeks, Monsieur Chrétien told us, tomorrow we're going to go on a trip, pack your bags. We packed our suitcase and we trudged along to the bus depot. When we got to the bus depot, we saw that on the bus it said Saint-Étienne. And Henry and I, by mental telepathy, we told each other, that's great, we're going home. We're going to see Papa and we're going to see Mama. Why didn't Monsieur Chrétien tell us? We get to Saint-Étienne, we get off the bus, Monsieur Chrétien takes us by the hand and he brings us to the police station. And he leaves us at the police station, and as he leaves, he tells us, they'll take good care of you here. So we had been betrayed and deserted. In the police station, we were interrogated, we were asked, where is your mother? What are her friends? We didn't have any information, we could not supply them any data. At which point they told us, in that case, you're going to be placed in an orphanage. Essentially, we were being held as hostages for my mother to come out of hiding.
The orphanage was a Catholic orphanage run by kindly nuns who promised us that if we were good, we could become priests. We never made it. The orphanage was across the street from a church to which we were marched once a day during the week and twice on Sundays for prayers. As part of our new identity, we were also given a rosary. For those of you who are not familiar with some of the Catholic practices, it's a set of beads which they count when they say certain prayers. I don't know where my brother and I got the idea and how we had the courage to rebel, but when we were counting the beads, we would say, God save us, God killed them, God save us, God killed them. The only reason I think we were able to do this is being twins, we always had at all times a critical ally who was totally, and I used the wrong word, it was an uncritical ally. We always had each other, and no matter what we did, we knew that between the two of us, we created our own reality. Incidentally, in the Catholic practice, they also kneel on two knees, and when they say their prayers. And Bernie and I had the idea that this was wrong. We should not do this. So we always cheated, and we always kneeled on one knee at a time. Anyway, we were in the Catholic orphanage for about 2 months when we experienced what my brother likes to call the great escape. One morning, as we were walking from the orphanage to the church, 2 men told us, "We have a message from your mother. If you want to see her, be at the back of the line tomorrow." I have no recollection of questioning the message or the messenger. The next day, we were at the back of the line, and the 2 men from the day before approached us, took our hands, and walked off with us without any outcry. You would expect that somebody would yell, "What's going on here?" But the 2 men took us and just walked us off. As it turned out, these 2 men were working for an organization, Lozé, which was a semi-clandestine organization that was still operating in France at that time, and which was dedicated to saving Jewish children. Somehow, my mother had learned where we were, and she had contacted Lozé, and at her urgence, they had come to get us. The 2 men from Lozé did not bring us to our mother, but they did take us for a train ride, and they placed us on a farm. Unfortunately, in this particular farm, we were very and incredibly malnourished. We became very, very sick. We had worms, and we literally stole food from the animals as we were so hungry. Someone from Lozé, after we were there about a month or 2, came to see how we were faring. They saw our condition, and they proceeded to take us from this farm, and they placed us in an orphanage in the city Grenoble. However, Lozé refused to tell my mother where we were for fear that either she would come and visit us, or else if she were arrested, she might disclose our whereabouts if she were tortured. Going back now to my mother's story, as Bernie told you, she managed to escape, and the first place that she went to was in hiding with a family, Les Parets, who unfortunately were denounced by their own son. And my mother barely escaped getting caught when she was coming to visit with the Parets as they were being arrested. After having to leave, after that episode, she managed to find shelter in a convent. Unfortunately, many convents did shelter Jews. However, there were the Germans, the French police would discover the fact that Jews were being hidden, and they would apply pressure. They would come, and the convent asked my mother to leave because it was too dangerous. At this point, my mother was literally walking the streets of Saint-Étienne with absolutely no place to go. She was at her wit's end. miraculously, as my mother was walking the street, she ran into a Madame Bonhomme. And as you all know, we have a tradition that names have significance. And Madame Bonhomme, bon is good, homme is man, and her name was Goodman, and indeed she turns out to be an incredibly good person. Anyway, it turns out that my mother knew this Madame Bonhomme because she had a dress shop in Saint-Étienne, and during the previous 2 years, from 1940 to 1942, my mother had made use of her services to make clothing for herself, my sister, my brother, and me. Madame Bonhomme saw my mother, and she said, "You look awful," and that's an understatement. Anyway, at this point, my mother just couldn't hold back, and she blurted out her story. At this point, she didn't know where my father was. She didn't know where my brother and I were. So she confided in Madame Bonhomme, and Madame Bonhomme, to her everlasting credit, and she was, believe it or not, a 30-year-old, recently widowed woman, told my mother, "I will help you." Madame Bonhomme proceeded to get my mother false papers. So my mother was born in Greive, Poland, now became Marie l'Héritier, born in the town of Bourmoncle in Haute-Loire, France. And this is, we're showing you a copy of false identity papers, and the next slide is, this is actually, as you see, our mother's forged birth certificate. This is a birth certificate attested to by her grandfather, François l'Héritier, that she was indeed born in Beaumont. Pause for a second to consider these two documents that we're showing you. Madame Bonhomme had to cajole an official to issue these false papers. Had the official betrayed Madame Bonhomme, or if somebody had betrayed Madame Bonhomme and the official, it certainly would have meant very possible death, if not severe punishment. While doing, in addition to getting the false papers for my mother, Madame Bonhomme arranged to have my mother go to work for a marquis in a castle, an honest-to-goodness castle, and the marquis was working for the French resistance, and he welcomed my mother to the castle. Shortly thereafter, after my mother was in the castle for a few weeks, it turns out that my sister, who had been hiding or had been hidden in a boarding school in the city of Lyon, developed the following problem. The boarding school was requisitioned by the Gestapo, and the children, certainly the Jewish children, were at great risk. My mother informed the Marquis of the problem, and the Marquis also, to his great credit, arranged to have my sister and a cousin, Annie, who was together with my sister, taken from the boarding school to live in the castle with my sister. At this point, Madame Bonhomme did a third thing. Again, at my mother's request, she negotiated with Lozé to find out where my brother and I were, and she learned, and she came to get us in the orphanage in Grenoble, and she brought us and she placed us with her mother, who had a little farm in a town called Saint-Paul-de-Mont.
La Mémé was a remarkable woman. She was a 65-year-old, wiry, wise woman with a worldly outlook. And we went to stay on the farm. This is Henry and me with our gray smocks and our wooden shoes. And we went to stay with her. The first day we were there on the farm, Meme asked us to go out and weed her garden. Henry and I, we went out there and we pulled out everything that was green. Everything that was green. Meme came out, she looked at her devastated garden, and she looked at us, and the look was, Henry and I, being very sensitive 8-year-olds, started crying. Meme immediately understood that we're city slickers and totally unreliable. She made us chocolate, and which was a rarity at that point. But we then went on to become good little farmers. We were able to take care of the goats, and we learned how to milk a goat. And this is really quite an art, which sounds great on your resume. Next. And this is Adolphine Dorel, Meme, my brother, and I, one of us. This is one of her daughters who is a challenged individual. And this is Riri Passeron, her biological grandson. Henry and I claim that Meme liked us more and preferred us over her own grandson. She was really an amazing individual. And I will tell you 2 stories that occurred while we were with her. Henry and I, from the time we had left our parents, we would say Shema. We would take a shmata, put it on our heads, and we would say Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuso Leolam Vaed. We would say it once, we would say it twice, we would say it till we fell asleep. It was our mantra, our connection with our parents. After we had been with La Mimi for a few weeks, she said, "What are you guys doing at night? I hear you mumbling." Henry and I, we decided to take La Mimi into our confidence, and we told her, "Mimi, we're saying a prayer." She turned to us and she asked, "What does it mean?" Henry and I, we didn't know. Mimi nonetheless said, "Why don't you teach it to me, and we will say it together." And you can imagine these 2 little guys saying, "Mimi, répétez, répétez, Shema Yisrael." She gave up. Another amazing episode occurred when we were going to school. There was a 1-room schoolhouse, and in that 1-room schoolhouse there were 10, at best, there were 10 kids. Almost everybody else went to the public school, to the Catholic school. Meme had, as a cover, had said that we were the children of one of her daughters who had married a Protestant, and that explained why we were not familiar with the rites of the Catholic Church, why we didn't cross ourselves appropriately, and also why we were able to go to the public school, whereas everybody else went to Catholic school. In that 1-room schoolhouse, there were Henry and I, the 2 Jewish Protestants, and there was one other Jewish child who was being hidden in the town with his family. We were 30% of the school population. We had a wonderful teacher, Madame Rochigneux, who insisted on decorum. We were good students, but one of us, who turned out later on to become a lawyer, would talk back and mumble. And Madame Rochigneux one day was very upset. She called Henri to her desk, and she gave him a smack. I thought his head was going to fall off. He goes back to his chair. What do you do if you go back to your chair and he puts his head down and starts mumbling again? Yeah, the same thing happened again. We went back to La Mimi that afternoon, And when she saw that, she was very upset. The next day, Mémé came with us to school, and she told Madame Rochigneux, on ne touche pas mes enfants. One does not touch my children. We had a friend and we had an ally. Throughout the rest of the war, we spent it with her. There are times when we went to bed hungry because she had a small farm. She didn't have much, but whatever she had, she shared with us. And if we went to bed hungry, she went to bed hungry. Our children, to whom we have told the story, even though she's not our biological grandmother, refer to her as Mémé. Going back to August 43, after we had been with La Mémé on the farm for about 4 months, she told us that her daughter, Madame Bonhomme, was going to be taking us to the castle to visit with our mother for the rest of the summer. For a week, we were literally floating on air, looking forward to the day when we were going to be reunited with our mother, whom we had not seen in a year. Although traveling involved substantial risks, Madame Bonhomme came to the farm and brought us to the castle. I recall arriving at the castle in late morning and hugging my mother and sister. You can imagine our joy at being reunited after a year's separation. We were given a grand tour of the castle. It was an incredible sight. We even had a photo op of this is my mother, my brother, me, a cousin, an aunt who was also hiding with my mother and my sister. We then went to eat lunch. We had barely finished lunch when we were told that the Marquis had been denounced and that the German police were coming to the castle. Fortunately, the Marquis was alerted in time, and he proceeded to have our family sent to a nearby farm where we were hidden in a hayloft for that evening afternoon, that late evening, and for the rest of the night. As nightfall came, we shared the airspace with bats flying around the hayloft, and as children we were screaming, and my mother did her best to keep us quiet. The Marquis, who had escaped to a nearby town, managed to alert Madame Bonhomme that what had happened and where we were hiding. She arrived the next morning and took Bernie and me back to her mother's farm. We had been with our mother for less than 24 hours. After that time, Madame Bonhomme took my sister and our cousin Annie to live with her in the back of her dress shop. Madame Bonhomme fabricated a cover that these two girls' mothers were married to French prisoners of war, and they had gone off to get to work. She drilled them to learn various Catholic prayers, so if questioned, they would be able to respond correctly. Ironically, the dress shop was across the street from a Gestapo office building. As for my mother, after the raid, she had to go. She had to go on the lam, but armed with the false identity card and false birth certificate, she managed to get work in a nursing home, and even though she had some very narrow escapes, she managed to live out the war. For Bernie and me, we had one last big scare in the fall of 1943.
turns out that the family of the other Jewish child in our school was arrested in a roundup by, again, the German police. As we were in school, Madame Rochigneux, the one who loved to hit me, but who must have known that we were Jewish, told us, you leave school, go immediately to La Mémé's farm, do not stop, go there directly. As we followed the order and we were proceeding down the road to the farm, Madame La Mémé was running up the hill and she was crying and obviously frightened. She told us, there is a big problem. We're going to be camping tonight. So that night we went camping in the woods. We spent the night in the woods. The next morning the German police detachment had left the town and we returned to the farm. After that, we continued to live with La Mémé until the end of August 1945, when we were finally reunited with our mother, whom we had not seen in over 2 years.
So that in the summer of 1945, the war was over, we were reunited. Our sister, who was 11 years old at that time, had been convinced of the story that our father was a prisoner of war, and she would skip school and go to the train depot waiting for her father to come back. Go ahead. Go. Go. So that in 1945, we get ready to come to the United States. And there's my brother, myself, my sister, and our cousin Jack. Our cousin Jack, unfortunately, his parents were murdered. My mother found him after the war, and we came to the United States. We settled on the Lower East Side. Life was difficult. Our mother had to struggle. She went to work to support her 3 children and a nephew. She insisted that we go to school, and Henry and I, we went to RJJ. RJJ is a prison on the Lower East Side. Subsequently, we went to City College. Henry got engineering degrees and also a law degree. I went to medical school and then served in the United States Air Force for 2 years in the medical corps. Our sister, Anna, went to Hunter College, became a French teacher. In 1980, our sister applied to Yad Vashem to have Adolphine Dorel and Jeanne Bonhomme recognized as righteous among the nations. They were duly recognized. La Mémé unfortunately died at the end of 1945, but her daughter Jeanne Bonhomme, Tatan Jeannot, came with her niece. There's our sister, our cousin Annie, Henry and I, and Paul Kedar, who was who was the Israel consul in New York City. It was a beautiful ceremony. It was a touching event. My sister made Aliyah, and the following year, Tatan Jeannot came to visit, and they planted the tree at Yad Vashem. And it's there, and it is blooming.
The event was duly reported in the local New York press and in many Jewish periodicals including the Jewish Floridian. And this leads us to our Uncle Siegfried's story, which we'd like to share with you. The story of the award was read by Siegfried Guter, an 86-year-old man living in North Miami Beach who was a survivor of Auschwitz and Buchenwald, where his first wife had perished. When Siegfried read the story, he wrote a letter to the Israeli consul in New York seeking to contact us. In Ziggy's words, after I read the article, I got very excited because of strong feeling that in this way I discovered the grandchildren of my late sister Charlotte Schanzer. I am very excited about it because all my family perished, sisters, brothers, nieces, and nephews. I am the only survivor and would be happy to discover from my family somebody alive, if only in the third generation. My late sister Charlotte perished in Krakow, from where I received the last letter addressed to me in Auschwitz. You would make an old, sick man very happy. The Israeli consul contacted us, and we set up a phone call with Siegfried. After exchanging hellos, he asked us, "Was your grandmother's name Charlotte?" Indeed it was, and you can imagine the audible gasp in his voice when we told him so. He was exultant. We could hear him crying and laughing at the same time. Ziggy then wrote a second letter to the Israeli consul, thanking the consul for completing the connection. In Ziggy's words, which bear repeating, Mrs. Steinberg and her brothers contacted me by phone, and we had a very exciting four-way conversation. They are, in fact, my deceased sister's grandchildren. So after so many years, I had the pleasure to discover some blood relatives when I thought I was the only survivor of my family. As a thank you, my wife pledges to work even harder for the cause of our spiritual homeland, Medinat Israel. Needless to say, we immediately arranged to go with our then entire family to Florida to visit with Ziggy and his wife Gisela, also a survivor of Auschwitz. Seeing us and getting together brought him great joy and happiness. To appreciate the significance to Ziggy of knowing that there were vibrant shoots, note the Guter family tree he drew for us the first time we met. Consider the enormity of the tragedy this represents. Wilhelm murdered, Samuel murdered, Charlotte, our grandmother, murdered, Bruno, our father, murdered, Max, his brother, murdered, Henrietta murdered, Helen murdered, Siegfried, the only survivor, Oscar murdered, Fanny murdered, Morris murdered, and all their spouses and children. As to the vibrant shoot, we show you our family, a picture of our family taken in 2015. These are the descendants of Bruno and Bella. We present this to highlight that their spirit lives on and that our family and our people have risen from the ashes. Thank God we have children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. The attempt by the Nazis and their cohorts to destroy the Jewish people has not succeeded, although they have inflicted great harm. It boggles the mind that the Nazis managed to murder 6 million of the 9 million Jews living in Europe. To this day, there are approximately 2 million fewer Jews than they were in 1940.
And this is a Yonadav Ver, our sister's grandson, and Bruno and Bella's great-grandson. He's served in the Israeli army. In the words of our great-uncle Siegfried, we must do whatever we can to support Medina Israel. It's not only our spiritual homeland, but it's our very home. We also have to be wary, and all of you are aware, that there is a rising anti-Semitism. And it's important for all of us to be vigilant and to speak out. We have another important mission, and that is to emulate the righteous among the nations. They had an amazing moral compass, which we have to incorporate. We have to stand up to evil. We have to be willing not to be incorporated with the majority. If you think something is wrong, speak up. It is important to remember that the righteous who saved us didn't save us once. They were willing to put their life at risk every moment, at every moment. We look around and, as somebody mentioned, our children and grandchildren, you read our hope, and you're proof that there is something wonderful happening in spite of all the tragedies. But you are the ones who have to carry out the mission. It is your obligation to make sure that this never happens again. Never happens again.
Does anyone have any questions?
Do we have another minute? Do we have a...
Sure.
Oh.
Want to tell everyone about your trip to France?
Oh. So that you heard about Tatan Janot and Adolphine Dorel and Jeanne Bonhomme being recognized as righteous. Henry and I, we started telling our story about 8-9 years ago. And then 4 years ago, we had mentioned, en passant, that we had been hidden, that my mother had been hidden in a castle. And the castle, there was a marquis and a marquise. These are prominent French people. And we were sure that they had been recognized. We looked into it, and nobody had ever recognized the marquis and the marquise of Virieu. Now, the scene in France has changed. There's a lot of anti-Semitism. The marquis and marquise are Catholic. We didn't even know whether they would be interested in being recognized as righteous. We approached them, and one of the marquis' children is my age, Wilfried, and we asked him, we'd like to have your parents recognized as righteous among the nations. And when we said that, his first words were, I was waiting for my father to be recognized as a righteous. So that we applied to Yad Vashem. They're very demanding. You really got to prove that they had done something extraordinary. It was duly done. And in 2016, after they were recognized, they wanted to have the ceremony in the castle where my mother had, not where my mother had been hidden, this was incidental, but where the marquis had been. And this was an amazing ceremony in the castle in France, where we had 300 people in their courtyard, and there were many dignitaries. Is there a... Next. And they had put, this is anti-Semitic France, where they had put this enormous flag on the wall of the castle. The ceremony started with the song of the resistance, and at the end, we were all moved when everyone stood up and we sang the Atikva, the hope. And this is one of the Marquis's sons. He's a general in the French Air Force. Henry and me, this is another one of his sons. This was the representative for Yad Vashem, and this was a member of the Israeli consulate in Paris. Do we have? And these are our children, our grandchildren. This is Nadine, the young woman who had come with Tatan Jeannot. And this is her father, Riri, the little kid who was between Henry and me. And we gave them a picture. That was the picture that had been taken in the castle, and I didn't know who had taken it, but we possessed that picture, and our family had a present. We decided to take a picture under the arch where we had been when we had been at the castle. Again, two of the Marquis' children have died, but here are three of them, and Henry and me.
Okay. We'll share, if you have one more minute. It turns out that 2 or 3 weeks before our trip to the castle, Bernie and I wanted to take our family to visit the little farm on which we had lived for 2.5 years. We remembered the farm quite well, but we were not sure exactly where the school was located where we had gone. So we proceeded to contact the mayor of the little town of Saint-Paul-de-Mont and to ask him whether he could give us some idea of the location of the school with respect to the farmhouse, so that we could take our children to see what things were like. The mayor said, "You have to come." And I told him, "Look, I'm not sure whether we're going to be able to come because we have the ceremony in the morning." He very nicely said, "If you don't want to come for yourself, come for us." Turns out we have 18 members of our family. We had a bus. We left the castle at about 1:32. We got to the town of Saint-Étienne. We got to the town of Saint-Paul-de-Mont. It was around 3, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. We were met by the mayor and about 100 members, family members, various farms, children. Anyway, there was an old entourage meeting us at the town square. The mayor then told us, "Look, if you really want to go back and see the farm where you lived, we'll accompany you." So you have this old procession taking us down a really long hill to the little farm. And the farm, this really is the farmhouse. When we lived in the farm, there was an outhouse. There was no indoor plumbing. We had to go to the bathroom outside. And the section that you see, the lower right-hand section, which is tiled with the red tile, that actually was a place where we kept cows and various goats. Anyway, we were looking at, we were making our little rounds, and you see Bernie and I holding each other, and the mayor then told us, there is an unveiling. And, first of all, okay, anyway, we're not sure about what was meant, what was going on. He took us around the side of this house, and to the side of the house, they have affixed the sign that says, "Here," I'll translate it for you, "Here were sheltered by Adolphine Dorel, the children Bernard and Henri Chanzer, during the Second World War. When we saw that, I mean, I was crying. I mean, this is incredible. But then they proceeded to take us back to town, and they had a ceremony at the town cemetery. And again, they had some various dignitaries talking, and one of the dignitaries said something which I thought was very significant to me. And the dignitary said, this, in a way, is our asking for forgiveness for what the Germans and the French collaborators did to the Jewish people.